All right, Bernie, it's about time we get you on here, man. It's been some time, man. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. Just keeping busy on the campaign trail. Thanks for having me on.
Nah, no problem, no problem. I was trying to get you on for some time, but I understand the life of a politician. Hopefully, I get there one day. Hopefully.
I prefer the term public servant, but
You prefer the word public servant?
yeah.
Then why?
I don't want to
Why
be a
public servant?
politician.
Why public servant, not politician?
I mean, my aim is to serve the public. That's my mission. I just love public service and serving others, and I just don't want to be associated with the political class.
Okay.
So I'm going in there to serve, pursue policies that I think are best for my constituents in the state of Florida, and eventually someday go back to private life and live under the policies that I debated, I helped pass, and so I push back against the politician term quite a bit just because I don't want
Okay.
to be associated with all the negatives that are in our political system and particularly within the political class. So
Well,
public servant.
the public servant, right? Great. So, Bernie, I'm obviously I know you, but most people don't, except for the people you work with in your district. So I would love to hear a little bit about you, where you're from, your family, uh, what drove you to want to serve, and what motivates you. Because there are a lot of young people out there that are watching. It's like, okay, they want to serve, they want to, get into politics, they want to do all these great things, but what got you to this path, on this the path that you're on, and what advice would you give to those who are aspiring to do what you're doing one day?
Sure. So my origins began in Haiti. We share that family background as being Haitian Americans. We grew up in the same community down in Collier County, and so the community that raised me. And when I came to the States, I was 7 years old, and so my family and I we fled political persecution from Haiti and came into the U.S. And as soon as we came to the U.S., my parents, they immediately got to work, worked hard, took advantage of all of the opportunities that this great country and our great state had to offer. And they immediately told my brothers and I that in this country, if you work hard, you play by the rules, and you have faith in God, all
Hmm.
things are possible. And I had basically a front seat at the American dream, seeing my parents achieve so much. And it
Hmm.
wasn't easy at first. They worked multiple jobs.
Hmm.
And Anderson, you'll know this town more than maybe most watching. But when we first moved to the United States, we lived with my uncle in Immokalee, Florida.
Oh,
And if anyone knows about Immokalee, Florida, I mean that's no easy street,
right, right,
And
right.
it was yeah.
Yep.
So I think the cool kids say came up out the mud. I think that's the term they use, right? So in a sense,
Hey.
in a sense, that was in Immokalee, Florida, and that community, initially, was part of my formation because, as I mentioned before, my parents worked two, three jobs. Um, my dad really pushed education. He got really involved with our schooling. He knew all of our teachers. He showed up to the PTA meetings and held us accountable. And I think the role of parents is super important, and the upbringing of a child, obviously. But having that involvement, I think, was super beneficial for me coming up. We eventually moved to Naples in the East Naples area, and as you know, it's a working class area in East Naples, and eventually moved into the Golden Gate community, still a working class area. But what happened was there was a progression at each step of the way. So I mentioned we first were living with my uncle. So it was my uncle, his wife, and his daughter, and then my mom, dad, and the three of us, so me and my two brothers, under the same roof. We then moved into a mobile home park, and I was thrilled because we had our own place, and there was a sense of pride there. And that place, I mean, looking back now, I mean, it was not ideal conditions, but we still had that pride because I saw the progression.
Yep.
And then from the mobile home, we went to an apartment, and I like that because I mean, The AC worked better. We were actually, you know, it seemed better than a mobile home park. And so it seemed like, all right, man, we're moving on up. When we moved to East Naples, Florida, we lived in a duplex, you know, so half of a home. But it looked like a home. And I was like, oh, man, this is pretty cool. And then all of this happened within 10 years. And then less than 10 years, you know, my parents became homeowners, you know, in our state, in Naples, Florida, and our great country. And so, you know, that can only be achieved, you know, through a system where there are opportunities. And I credit a lot. That's why I push back whenever I see people try to push socialism and Marxism, because only the free enterprise system can reward people in this fashion when you work hard and apply yourself and to be able to achieve these things. And so I graduated from Naples High School, and that's when I really started to get my, you know, political bearings about me. So I was interested in politics, I would say, probably in middle school when I started really looking at politics. And it came through the subject of history. So I love history. I majored in history. And ever since probably fifth grade, I really like delved into history. And so following, you know, when you study a lot of history, a lot of the figures of history are obviously political leaders. And so especially our founding fathers in this country and the United States really intrigued me and really got me looking at our system. I recall in middle school, a gubernatorial election was happening in the state of Florida, and it was between Jeb Bush. Jeb Bush was running on the Republican side. And I remember asking a teacher. Actually, I remember being engaged about it from a teacher who would always give us the current events. But I remember asking, you know, someone, who should I be for? I was like, you know, this is exciting. I want to be part of the action. Who should I be? Who should I be for? And this person told me, well, you have to support the Democrat. And they gave me two reasons. They're like, because you're Black and because you are an immigrant. So that means you have to support the Democrat. And mind you, I mean, I think I was like sixth, seventh grade, and I was like, I didn't know any better. So I was like, oh, okay, I guess that's what we do, you know. So I just went along with it, and didn't give it much thought. I mean, so I go into high school, and now we're in junior year of high school, and I had Coach Garvey, right, for AP American History,
right.
And we would always debate, man. We'd go back and forth, and Coach Garvey, I mean, I think, as you know, is he's a liberal guy. I mean, he comes from the left, but he always encouraged and accepted debate and opposing viewpoints. And so we will not only debate the topics of history, but also current events as well. And I always, unbeknownst to me, I had no kind of self-awareness about political spectrums, but I always came down on the conservative side, defending either conservative agenda, Republican agenda. And at one point in class, he just, used the term with me. He was like, Bernie the Republican or Bernie the conservative, kind of as a derogatory, right? And I was like, I was like, okay, well, I was like, if that's what they believe, then I guess I'm a conservative Republican. Right. And so I ran with it, and I never looked back. And this was junior year in high school, and he encouraged it, right? So and he saw that these were genuinely my views, and so I adopted them and sought to forward and advance conservative policies throughout my young adulthood. When I went into college, immediately joined the College Republicans. I went to Washington Adventist University, just outside the DC area. So I remember being very active on campus as a campus conservative. And it was a culture shock because, as you know, Carter County, Naples is this, by and large, a conservative community. And so go up to the DC area, and you had, this was during the Bush years, and it was in Tacoma Park, Maryland. I mean, it was basically, I don't say this to be mean or anything, but it was a town of hippies, basically. And and just, hardcore leftists, and they're calling Bush a war criminal. They hate our, I was like, what is this? What's going on?
Right.
I never experienced it like this. But it toughened me up because I had to defend my views, not only, in the community, because I was surrounded with people who didn't think like me at all, but obviously in the college campus as well, not unlike most college campuses. conservatives are usually, a quiet or in the minority, and you have the liberal professors or just even your peers who just adopt more liberal philosophies. But I stay true. I defended those views day in and day out,
Mm-hmm.
throughout the night in the dorms, having late night debates with fellow students in the dorms, and so I appreciated that experience because it really helped me sharpen my beliefs, and I heard counter viewpoints that I hadn't been exposed to before, and was able to reassess why I believe what I believe, and able to be much better, I think, and more grounded in my conservatism. And so graduated college, came back to Florida for law school, went to Stetson Law, and again was a campus conservative activist, was involved in the Stetson Law Republicans, as well as the Federalist Society, which is an organization of conservative legal people, so conservative lawyers, but they have student chapters as well. So when I left Stetson, I worked as a state prosecutor. And from there, I went to private practice and civil litigation. And now I work in the nonprofit sector, and I am a candidate for state representative.
Great. Man, it's a great story, because your story is inspirational to a lot of young kids, believe it or not. One of the things I thought about when I was doing this, because my mindset is I never had any intentions of doing a YouTube channel. That was never my intentions. And so I had a friend from my Foresick Academy days, a young lady I used to date, by the way, who suggested, she said, hey, why don't you, you're always posting political quotes and stats and whatnot. Why don't you start this channel? I'm like, you know what? I don't have time for that. But then I started thinking to myself, well, you know what? There are a lot of great people I would love to interview. So, because I know these people, but I would love for others to get to know them. And so bringing somebody like yourself on, it's inspirational to a lot of kids, because it's not just Haitian kids that are coming from Haiti and having to go through these struggles and overcome them. You have Hispanic students. I have my Hispanic students. You have Africans. You have Asians. And so it's amazing to see how your parents they flee Haiti due to political persecution. They come to the United States, start from the bottom, they work themselves up. And that's part of the American story. So then I've had conversations with people who said pulling yourself up by the bootstrap, or the American dream, it's not real. Everyone, receives help. But then now you just told me how your parents worked their way from Immokalee. And if if you're not from Collier County, you should Google Immokalee. And so I've driven through parts of Immokalee where there's no electricity.
Yeah.
So
no lie.
So people from Haiti, and they're like, you know what? We have 2 kids at the time. At the time, it was just the 2 of you, right?
Yep, 2 of us, and then my younger brother came later. Yep.
Right. So then they're like, you know what? We're not going to settle here. We're going to strive and be better. So then when I hear this, I hear your story, and I hear thousands of other stories about people who the same situations are able to overcome and succeed. What do you say when people say, well, you know what? This notion of pulling yourselves up by the bootstraps, it's not real. Everyone gets help. The American dream is only for a few. And that you mentioned socialism. We need to push more socialism and help more people. What do you say to that?
Look, I push back against it, and I never once would I say we received, no help or assistance. And I like I mentioned, my mom's brother took us in, right? So, but we weren't complacent, and just living there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my mom, initially they were working some tough jobs. One of my dad's first jobs was at a Circle K outside of Immokalee. Mm-hmm. So getting out of town to work at that Circle K. My mom worked, as you know, Immokalee is a big agricultural area. She not only worked in the fields, in the agricultural fields, picking various produce, but then she was working at the packing houses as well. Tough jobs. Mm-hmm. And mind you, And mind you, let me give you this context. When we lived in Haiti, I mean, we're a pretty solid middle class family. I mean, my mom, for all intents and purposes, was stay at home mom,
Mm-hmm.
and my dad had a job in the government, and it was a very stable life economically, but it was not a stable life in the society as a whole, unfortunately, as we know about Haiti. And so when political violence erupted, that is what propelled us to leave. So you have a situation where these two individuals are in their 30s. They've built a life,
Mm-hmm.
in Port-au-Prince, Haiti,
Mm-hmm.
and having to leave their native country and their family members, brothers and sisters, their network, their church. I mean, I remember that final goodbye to the church.
Mm-hmm.
They brought us up to the stage of the pulpit, and my dad was very involved with the church, left everything behind to seek a new life and to be humbled from where we were to now being to living with a relative and having to take, jobs that some people think they're better than, quite frankly, right? I mean, the type of work they did. And so that kind of tells you the mindset of people like my parents who came here and took advantage of every opportunity they could get. But it also shows you the beauty of America, because where you start is not a determining factor of where you will finish, because
Mm-hmm.
applying yourself is everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so coming from that and having to do these tough jobs, they knew it would still be better than being in Haiti because of the lack of opportunities and the ceiling, because of instability, because of a lack of law and order, quite frankly. The rule of law broke down, right? And maybe we'll get into that a little bit later, but that's very important for society. And so that's why they left. And so for them to have started at that level and then eventually achieve things, like I said, well before, 10 years, way under 10 years, became homeowners and saw one of their sons not only graduate college, graduate law school, but serve the state as an assistant state attorney,
Mm-hmm.
and get appointed by the state's governor to the Judicial Nominating Commission, all in one lifetime. I mean, literally, I know it sounds cheesy, but only in America.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I
these
agree.
things don't happen in other places. I mean,
Nope.
a lot of places, even in Western European countries, your family situation a lot of times determines where you'll end up. You're
Yep.
categorized.
Yep.
And so this country, the mobility that people can achieve is amazing. And it's because of the free enterprise system that allows people to be rewarded based on the work that they put in,
Right.
and they can have a better life, for future generations, even if it will be tough. No one's promising it's going to be easy.
Right.
But we do promise there will be liberties and opportunities for you to pursue that happiness.
And thank you. That's inspirational. It really is. Even someone who's a go-getter myself, who's striving every day, to hear your story, that even inspires me to work even harder. And that's the beauty about our country. And I'm glad you touched on the point, because I remember 2004, I was 13, and then state senator, who would eventually become president, Barack Obama, addressed the DNC, and he said on the stage, only in America, I'm quoting him, that his story is possible. On no other country on earth, his story is possible. And so it amazes me how, even people who will push for certain policies will make these statements and say, only in America. Because if you think about it, your story, where else could that happen? It doesn't happen anywhere else. You know what I'm saying? It's just, you don't hear people risking their lives to go to France, to go to China, to go to Brazil, and those are great countries. But people will risk their lives to come to America because they understand this is a land of opportunity, and this is a land where you can leave your country and come here, and your mother can work in the field, your father can work at Circle K, and then you graduate law school, you become a state attorney, and now you're running for a state house position. Now, if that's not hard work, and determination and God's grace. I mean, how do you explain that? I mean, you had to put in the work. Nothing was given to you. And that is the issue I tend to have when people say, well, you know, my race, my gender, or that's going to impede me from succeeding. And it amazes me to hear your story and you say, you know what, this is where I came from, this is the work I have to go through, and here I am today. Now, when you speak of the work, that it's not easy, what are some of the trials that you had to endure throughout on your journey to get to this point?
Sure. Look, various trials. I mean, no one is exempted from issues or obstacles in life.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter where you come from. And so, looking at my situation, when I first moved here to the state, I was 7. Starting in elementary school, I remember days in elementary school where the teacher would be talking to people, and I literally did not know what people were saying because I didn't know English, right?
Hmm.
And it was just kind of it's hard to describe to people who don't know that feeling, but you're just sitting there,
Hmm.
and you're trying to go along. You're trying to guess. It's hard to describe. It really is. But I still remember those days.
Right.
And yeah, and so, but we had, again, my dad being involved and speaking very little English at the time, and still making the effort to show up to the school and meeting my teachers. I think made a great difference there. And it did a couple of things, right? It let the teachers know that I have somebody at home that is uh, being mindful of my education. And so I think that helped the teachers go a little above and beyond and looked at me different. And
Hmm.
um, and it's amazing. Actually, I was just home over the weekend for Mother's Day, and my dad actually gave me a stack of like old report cards from elementary school, and I was just going through them in the comments, and one in particular was in second grade. I was trying to get my bearings about me, but I mean, I wasn't making the best of marks. But the teacher commented like Bernie has the ability to do second grade work. I think the teacher went above and beyond and kind of looked past, because I think when there is a language barrier sometimes initially, it doesn't mean that it's a lack of intelligence or lack of ability. And so sometimes, without that support from teachers who can go an extra step further under a layer and seeing that that child has potential, sometimes that person could be written off. Again, the role of the parent is everything,
Hmm.
because, and so I saw that coming up. And to the point while I was in middle school, I remember I took the first step. No one assigned me honors classes initially. I was in 7th grade, and I remember being bored in language arts. And I told my dad, I want to be in the honors language arts class. I want to challenge myself. I think I can do it. And went in there and excelled. And then while I was in high school, started taking honors and AP courses. Um, and a lot of times, again, a lot of people like to write themselves off because of the way they look, because of where they're from. When I was in AP courses at Naples High School, I was one of the few people who looked like me, right, in those
Right.
courses.
Right.
But I did not let that impede me because I knew my abilities and I
Right.
knew I could work hard. It would have been easy for me to look around the room and be like, "Oh, woe is me! I can't do it." I mean, I
Yeah.
literally, just came from Haiti, and I'm a minority. I can't do this, and
Right.
just walk myself out the room.
Right.
But I didn't.
Right.
I competed.
Yeah.
And I remember, so this is 10th grade, I took AP World History. And I didn't know this, but I was confident in my abilities. But Coach Bond was my teacher. And I don't know if you had Bond, but he told me actually like a few years ago, he was like, look, there were some people who did not think, you could compete, in AP courses. But I was one of the few people who like passed the AP exam, and got the college credits, and so but I never limited myself. I knew I could do it. I knew I could work hard as long as I had the opportunities, and I could achieve. And so these are the type of things I think people, especially with our backgrounds, for to be blunt, have to get over.
Right.
You just really do have to get over it,
Right.
and stop feeling sorry for yourself, and stop with this woe is me, and that I'm a victim, this victim mentality. Oh, I'm never gonna make it. The chips are stacked against me.
Right.
I mean, stop. Just really stop.
Right.
You're an individual. You have potential, and you need to channel that, and you need to dig deep and put yourself in a position where you can work hard and prove to others that you do belong, as opposed to proving those people, wherever they may be, proving them right by giving up and excluding yourself, quite frankly. And so yeah, so there's been, various challenges, but I think a lot of it is, number one, my faith is very important to me. And so, when you have, a certain faith, obviously, that overrides a lot of things, right? When you commit things to prayer and things like that. Additionally, again, not limiting yourself, trying different things, and just sheer hard work is something I think everybody should pursue, because at least at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, even if you don't succeed, even if you don't achieve, you gave it your best. It was not for lack of trying. Right. Where you can be upset with yourself is if you do look back and you're like, wow, I could have given more. Mm-hmm. I could have tried that. I could have gone to that place. But I told myself I couldn't. No one really stopped me. I just told myself, because I'm X, Y, and Z, I can't be there. And I'm not comfortable. I don't want to live that way. And that's the way I've been approaching, my journey.
And I'm glad you touched on that. I remember when I was in school, I had a few friends. I had friends at the time who I've always spoke proper English, and you're supposed to speak, like a proper human being. So I was made fun of because I spoke proper, and the saying was, if we got pulled over, we'd be the one to get away because the way I speak. And I'm like, well, yeah, why would I want to go to jail? Who wants to go to jail? And I'm glad you touched on that point, because I believe a lot of the media and, different factions of our society, they profit from pushing this narrative, because the way you look, the color of your skin, your gender, these are things that are going to inhibit you from succeeding. And I'm having a conversation with you, but my story, it's similar in terms of, my father came to this country on a raft in 1981, on a raft. He was apprehended by law enforcement, sent to a detention center in Puerto Rico, gained citizenship, came back in 1981 within that same year, and he's been here for 4 years now. And I remember as a kid growing up, he worked at a factory. Every morning at 7 a.m., he worked at a factory from 7 to 3. And a couple of years ago, I'm walking through the east wing of the White House and meeting the president. And so I sent my dad the picture, and he's like, hey, I never would have thought in my wildest dream, on my way to the United States back in 1981, migrating here, that I would have a son that would eat dinner at the White House. And I remember when I received the invitation to go, there were people that were saying, why would you go? The occupant, terrible. Why would you go? Like, oh my God. And I'm looking at him like, you don't know my story? You know where my parents come from? You know how hard my parents had to work? I received an invitation by the commander-in-chief, the most powerful man in the world. I'm going to turn it down because the news and your feelings about things, I'm going to say no to this opportunity? I'm like, majority of Americans will never have the opportunity to be invited by the president of the United States to go have dinner and listen to him speak. Why would I turn that down? Because of what? And so I'm glad you bring up that, not limiting ourselves due to our skin color, our race, gender, background, because these limits, they're self-imposed. And I noticed that a lot of the people that push these narratives, they're successful.
Right.
You know,
Right.
they're lawyers, they're doctors,
Nothing.
they're teachers.
Oh my gosh, nothing irks
Yes,
me more, Anna, than I mean that's one of the top things. One of my top pet peeves. That and immigrants who bash the country.
right,
Like people who literally left somewhere, and they come here, they
right,
trash America.
right,
And I'm looking, I'm like, why are you here? Why did you come? I mean, like, you're here for a reason.
right.
It's not that bad. And to your point about people not risking their lives to go to other places, but the reverse is also true. No one is risking their lives to leave America. Nobody's getting on rafts to go the other way.
Yes,
In addition to USA,
right.
to escape in the cover of night. I mean, the reason why that's not happening, that should tell you this is a great place. This is an exceptional place. This is a great country. But let me get off that tangent. And address.
Yeah,
It just really took me off. So, yeah, a lot of these people who are super successful are the ones who are perpetuating this agenda, this narrative about how people are out to get us. I mean, one of the chief offenders of that, I think, you mentioned Obama earlier, but I think Michelle Obama, as of late, some of her recent comments, and even her comments when Barack got the nomination, it seems very hypocritical and so divorced from the reality that they're living. I mean, mind you, these are two couples, Ivy League trained, living in a certain segment of society that most Americans will never see,
Right.
even if he didn't become president, right?
Martha's Vineyard.
Even if he didn't even become U.S. senator, even if he wasn't a state senator. I mean, the fact that, you went through Columbia and Harvard, I think she went to Princeton,
Harvard.
or maybe Princeton, Harvard. I mean, in the life they were living, I mean, in Chicago, most people will not see that level of network. And she had the audacity when he got the nomination, and I'm paraphrasing, like, for the first time in my life, I'm proud, of our country. Like, it was like a victim mentality. And now all of a sudden you're proud because your husband got a nomination. Never mind all of the things you achieved,
Right.
all the things you've been given in this great country. Now all of a sudden it's a great place. No, this happened because it is a great place.
Right.
And these people do a disservice to young people who are coming up, who have the drive within them, who have natural abilities that they can make so much of, not only to benefit themselves and their families, but their community and their nation at large. When you push out these narratives, it's destructive to youth.
Right.
Because then young people who look like them become afraid to do certain things because they already have it in their mind that somebody's out to get them and that this is an unjust place. And so they won't try certain things. They won't go in certain rooms. They won't apply to certain things because they already believe that they've lost. And it's dangerous. It's divisive. And I hope to God it's not intentional. Because I do think there are some people who want to divide and want to keep certain people feeling like victims, because, and quite frankly, it often comes from those big government types, the people who advocate big government. Because if there's no victims, why do you need a big government for? And so you need a government to rescue you if you feel like you're victimized. If there's no victims, people will be like, I don't need your help, I can do it myself, and there'll be more personal liberties and personal responsibility. So unfortunately, it seems like some of these folks on the left like to perpetuate a struggle. There always has to be a struggle. Nothing can just be cool. There always has to be some kind of strife. Right. Guess who's coming to the rescue? Big government.
Well, man, that's why I created this channel. My intention with this channel was not to get 100,000 subscribers. I'm not looking to be a YouTube star. My intention is to have good conversations with both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats and moderates, and get a different points of view, because I don't watch much television. When I do it, I'm only watching sports or a political documentary. But people are not getting both sides. They're just hearing, okay, CNN, Fox, or MSNBC, or ABC, CBS, or NBC. And so, I bring you on as a conservative to get a viewpoint. And I have other, when I have uh, my liberal and or moderate friends, I bring them on. And so now people are being exposed to three different viewpoints, and it's up to them to choose which side they want to go on. And so, which leads me to, so you want to become a conservative that, your views, you have conservative views all along, but in high school, the coach really pushed you and said, okay, this is where you align, this is where you should go. So then I know right now you are running for a state house position. How is the campaign going? Uh, are you enjoying yourself? Um, and is there anything that you would like to get out in terms of messaging, support, fundraising, and what is your platform? What are your values? Where do you see the state of Florida going? And also, I know with most politicians, they either run for the House of the U.S. Senate or they start at the state level. And there's no way, in my mind, and I believe you'll win next year. And if you're watching, my friends and family in Florida, please get out and vote. But there's no way in my mind you're going to stop at the state house. That's where it ends.
Well, first of all, before I answer your questions, BernieForFlorida.com, BernieForFlorida.com. That is the website. If you'd love to support, we will take all donations. Subscribe to our mailing list. Spread the word. BernieForFlorida.com. So why am I running? I think especially since the pandemic, the eyes of the nation have been on the state of Florida, and now a lot of people are calling it the free state of Florida. When overburdensome blue states were locking their people down, Florida was doing reverse. We're lifting our people up. We're lifting restrictions. We're allowing people to have a life, and doing it within the real science and sensible safety measures, like putting seniors first, and taking care of the most vulnerable. A lot of that is thanks to our great governor, Ron DeSantis. And so Florida has always been a special place, and it has displayed itself to be that even more so during the pandemic. And we need leaders who are going to fight to protect these freedoms and opportunities. That's exactly why I'm running. I don't only know it because of recent events to show why our state is exactly just that. You look at the migration patterns of all the people who are moving down to Florida from these lockdown blue states. And a quick programming note: if you're one of those people that is fleeing a blue state, please don't vote the same way. When you come down to Florida, like if you're voting for the same people who are locking you down, don't. There's a reason why you're fleeing, right? So don't keep voting for these liberal authoritarian types when you came to Florida, for freedom. All right. So don't forget you are a refugee of sorts in our great state. So don't return back to those bad habits. I'm half joking, but I also know that experience because of the way I grew up. As I mentioned, we have freedoms and opportunities unique to this state, unique to our country, and it's time for leaders to step up to protect it. That's why I'm running. I'm running to keep Florida free. And I think we do that by focusing on three main areas. Number one, restoring and fighting for law and order. Number two, making sure that we have real education as opposed to liberal indoctrinations in our schools, and that has to stop. We need to just go back to basics and teach school as opposed to viewpoint indoctrination. And then last but not least, focus on a strong economy. Those are the three main issues. So public safety, education, and the economy, jobs. These are things that apply to everyone, whether you're on the right, on the left, or in the middle. You want to have safe communities to thrive in. You want your children to get a quality education. And you want there to be opportunities for you to find employment and for you to provide for your family. And so these are the things I'm laser focused on. When it comes to law and order, My background as a state prosecutor uniquely qualifies me to pursue those policies. I think we need to, number one, stand with our men and women in law enforcement who have been, taking a lot of hits lately, and their profession has been trashed, quite frankly, by radicals and people who just want to bash a very noble profession. I mean, these are people literally that run towards danger when you and I would run away from it, right? That's the job that they signed up for. So the lack of respect is really infuriating to me as a person who grew up respecting law enforcement and as a former prosecutor who worked with these heroes, and seeing what they have to go through to put a case together and to keep communities safe. It's wildly unfair. How they're being treated is just wrong. Secondly, we need to make sure that we have the right laws in the books that make sure that communities are being safe. We just passed in Florida an anti-riot bill, not an anti-protest bill like a lot on the left or will try to confuse it with. It's an anti-rioting bill so that you don't have looting and burning and violence when you are upset about a particular situation. I was on I was on a special on local television, and I was debating a local protester, and she tried to invoke, MLK and John Lewis in her defense of, in her attack of this anti-rioting bill. And I said, stop this right now. Just stop. This is disrespectful. Because I do not recall MLK and John Lewis, running out of a store with a TV, in their hand. I don't remember MLK and John Lewis, burning down a local corner store, to their point across. And I certainly don't recall MLK and John Lewis, committing violence on law enforcement. I mean, so don't equate the two, right? We are beneficiaries of these civil rights leaders and heroes who did it the right way. They protested. These are First Amendment rights, which everyone has. But don't confuse that with rioting and burning and looting. And so in Florida, we're going to have no tolerance for that. And I want to make sure that that remains the case. And then I'm also a big believer in the Second Amendment, because I don't believe you can have public safety without personal safety. And that's why, as state representative, I'll always defend and support an individual's right to keep and bear arms. And we're not going to infringe upon that, because I think you are your last line of defense. And law-abiding citizens should not be unarmed and should not be disarmed while the crooks are armed to the teeth. Secondly, when it comes to education, what I mean by real education, again, I alluded to this, was, first of all, just pushing back against different narratives that are more about indoctrination than education. Things like critical race theory and 1619 Project and these type of things that basically teaches, they're basically Marxists, in my viewpoint, and teaches people to hate their country and to have resentment and again, to limit yourself. Again, a victim mentality. Woe is me, I'm the victim. And then you start discriminating the reverse way. And so when these curriculum are teaching people, you look at somebody just because they happen to be white, automatically it's assumed that they're privileged. It's automatically assumed that they are an oppressor, and automatically assume that they're out to get you. How is that beneficial to a society? It's not. And I will stand against it in the state legislature. And then I think there needs to be a renewed focus on vocational skills-based education. Because, you and I were both college educated. What we wanted to do requires a college degree for what we wanted to do. But there are good jobs out there, good paying jobs that don't require a college education. And we need to have the all of the above approach for our students to let them know of all of their options, so that we don't pressure just a one size fits all college or nothing type of scenario, because then we do a disservice to that student who could have gotten a certification as a mechanic, as an electrician, as a welder, jobs where they can make a good, decent living and good pay and support a family without wasting the time in a academic higher ed institution, racking up all sorts of loans when they could have been better off had they been presented with all of the options at the K to 12 level. And so a renewed focus on vocational education is something I want to bring about. And then last but not least, to achieve a strong economy, we need to make sure that we stand with our small businesses. We cannot have these kind of shutdowns that we saw during the height of the pandemic. People need to make a living. I mean, this whole notion of essential jobs and non-essential. Look, if that's the way you make a living to feed your family, it's essential. Your business is essential to you. It may not be to government. Well, it is when they want to tax you out the wazoo. Then it becomes essential. But when they want to flex on you, all of a sudden it becomes non-essential. They put you out of work. We need to stop that. And then we also need to make sure that we have the regulatory and the tax framework that is friendly for businesses to grow. So cutting unnecessary taxes, keeping taxes low, and cutting regulations on businesses, and as well as on occupational licensing, where people hit a roadblock from making a living based on their own skills. So that's something we need to be addressed as well. And then last but not least, go out and tell the great story of Florida to people, and that this is a great place to, if you're in one of those lockdown states, to relocate your business and add to the fabric of our state, and to bring more jobs here, more investments. And those are the things that I want to be an advocate for.
Impressive. Yeah, no, I remember I moved down to Florida from Connecticut when I was 11. I hated it. I was upset because I had been in Connecticut from the time I was a baby, from preschool up until 5th grade, and you're relocating. You have to make new friends, new teachers. And I told my parents, I can promise you, as soon as I graduate high school, I'm going back up north. That's exactly what I did. But Florida's a great state. It truly is. No state income tax. I love it. Nice weather. It gets really hot in July. The beaches are awesome. And I remember last year going down to Florida when the pandemic, at the outset of the pandemic, it was relief. Sitting on the beach and just relaxing and knowing that, okay, yes, we're in a pandemic. Yes, the virus is real, but I'm around people who are not allowing the fear and a lot of the propaganda to get to them. And obviously, our hearts go out to the people who lost their loved ones, and hopefully our country gets back on its feet, and which it will. We always do. We're American. But what infuriated me was the way the media was covering the virus and how they were pushing a lot of fear into people. And I didn't appreciate that. But I'm really happy that you are running. And yes, if you're watching Friends and Family, get out there, support Bernie. I think Bernie will be a great state rep. And now, which leads me to my next question. The state of our country right now. I saw the gas lines, and I joked with one of my teacher colleagues, it looks like Jimmy Carter Part 2. So, what is the state of our country right now?
Right. It is. It's a sequel. It's a sequel of Jimmy Carter. Right. And ironically, there's a now famous weird photo of where Jill and Joe Biden are taking a picture of the Carters. Right. And maybe that was the omen, the foreshadowing when that picture dropped. We should have known.
What's to come?
And here we are. It's like the late 70s again. Long gas lines, an aggressive and empowered Iran, Israel under attack, inflation looms, and a weak administration who gets pushed over by our adversaries. Certainly, this is not where we want to go back to. And Americans, I think, of all stripes, are opening up their eyes to that, and they're seeing that there is a lack of leadership. But we here's the thing. A lot of people who had agreed with former President Trump's policies, a lot of them had told me, "Oh, I can't vote for him because things he says, or his basically his mean tweets, right?" But the policies were working. We saw unrivaled periods of prosperity, the lowest unemployment rate for the whole country, and the best economy in like 50 years, and lowest unemployment on record for Blacks, Hispanics, women, all prior to the pandemic, which we all had to deal with. But I mean, the economy was rolling on all cylinders, and you can like or not like his attitude, but President Trump was getting the job done. I mean, you just can't compare the two administrations, in my opinion. And there's a funny meme going around now that I forget. It was like I would love to have a mean tweet about now for low price in gas. Not only are these gas lines long, I mean that the price is getting out of control, right? So I mean, if that was the issue, that now you have a guy who doesn't post mean tweets but is barely with it, but then the country is going down the tube. I mean, I think the choice is clear there. And I think that will make a lot of people wake up for the midterm elections in 2022. And you can expect to see the Republicans regain the House, make gains back to the Senate, hopefully won that as well. And then on to 2024, where we try to right the ship. Sure. The only silver lining about Jimmy Carter Part 2 is that we know how that ended. We had the great Ronald Reagan, who came to the rescue. And we saw prosperity in the 80s. We defeated our adversaries. I mean, it was great. Good times were here again.
It's funny you say
that. To my fellow patriots, don't lose heart. Don't lose heart. Because these are the type of things that awaken Americans. And we're going to fight back come 2022 and 2024.
Yeah, no, I thought about that. I was like, okay, well, Jimmy Carter, I'm like this. Well, for the conservatives, if this is Jimmy Carter Part 2, that means another Reagan's around the corner in 2 years. I haven't followed much news lately, but I did hear about the gas line. My brother sent me a picture. He's like, "Yo, what's going on with these gas lines in Florida? Like, people 1970s all over again. What's going on here?" It's interesting. So then,
that's bad.
Okay, so then now we're gonna wrap up soon, but we've had the issue of policing, which you touched on earlier. Obviously with what happened with George Floyd last year, which was a tragedy within itself. Every life is precious. Now, obviously, the trial was conducted. The officer was found guilty, which I knew was coming because, it was either that or we wouldn't have a country. And I have two cousins that are police officers, one in Miami, one in Orlando. And Miami's a tough place. Police, it's a really tough place. Them all the time. Well, my cousin's husband's first cousin's a police officer, and they were like, Anderson, this defunding movement, we're already understaffed and underfunded. If this pushes through, we won't have a force. And I'm talking about places like Opelika, Liberty City, Little Haiti, a reduced police force or no police force, or places like Chicago. Could you imagine Chicago, Baltimore with they already have, but I think New York, they're like at about 20. I think Chicago, they're in the thousands now. And you see what's going on in Chicago now. Can you imagine with a lesser force or no force, or social workers?
Right.
I mean, so what is the state of police in America? And what would you like to see done, especially as a potential state rep? What are the things would you propose if elected? And I believe you'll get elected. What are the things will you propose? And first of all, my question is, what is the state of policing? And then, if elected, when you are elected, what policy will you propose in the Florida State House? So policing could be, the honor of policing could be restored. And also, we root out the bad apples. And also, in terms of the American people, the things that they would want to see in terms of police reform. What is the state of policing, and what policies would you push as a state rep?
Yeah, the state of policing, unfortunately, is sad in a lot of parts of our country because of the negative narrative that is going around. Some of the things I touched upon earlier. Not only are there real movements from leaders in government to defund our police, to take resources from our men and women in blue, our heroes, but we hear just kind of the vitriol, um, lobbed at police, and they're being trashed each and every day. Actually, today I was at an event and I saw one of our local police chiefs, and I asked him, how are things on the force? How are things at the department? And he said it's tough. He's like, the current climate, it's hard to retain officers. They're retiring early. It's hard to hire new ones, and all because of the negative narrative that is going around. And who do you think suffers from that? It's at-risk communities. It's high crime communities that are often, some of the more socially economically depressed areas. And so that's a problem. That's a big issue. And that's something that definitely needs to be addressed, because if you don't have police in some of these neighborhoods, you bring up the point. I mean, we already have all these shootings that's going on in places like Chicago. Imagine if there was no police force, it'll be chaos. It'll be pure anarchy. And so that's the state of policing right now. Unfortunately, a lot of good people who could contribute are refusing to do so because of the way they're being treated. And it's very unfortunate, because we need good men and women in policing. So that's unfortunately the state of policing. And so if anybody's watching who is in law enforcement or family members in law enforcement, know that there are a lot of people, myself included, and I think I can speak to you. I think I could speak for you too, Anderson, who support our men and women who are doing the job right and who are part of a noble profession. Keep your head up, and God bless you. Where do we go from here? So I think, number one, I think leaders need to push back against the defund movement, because when you take away resources from the police, again, a lot of people who are victimized by crime are some of the same people that the defunders try to say they're helping by defunding the police, right? Because they see police as oppressive towards certain groups. But the people who are largely victimized by violent crime are those same type of people. These people will suffer as a result. Additionally, we need to add funding, actually, to our police forces so we can address, crime issues as well. We also need to bring back and foster conversations and communities, bridging those gaps. One of the things, I'm very involved with in my employment with a nonprofit is doing a program that makes law enforcement officers become mentors to at-risk youth, bridging that gap. I mean, when you see each other as people, it's amazing the negative notions that it will dispel. Youth who grew up thinking that all police officers are bad, all of a sudden get matched with a mentor who's a police officer, and then it changes their worldview. And so what do you think that does? It has ripple effects, because then if they are stopped, the interaction will not be as hostile. You don't automatically think, oh shoot, that cop is out to get me, so I'm gonna, be aggressive and bow up on a police officer, because you knew a real officer who took time to mentor you, and and now they're not all that. Something that we should know, but if that's all you hear as a kid growing up in a certain neighborhood, that's what they're going to believe, and it's going to lead to negative interactions. And so bridging that gap, I think, is essential, and funding those type of programs and those community programs are great. There's a lot of other nonprofits who do things like Coffee with a Cop, where you can go to a local coffee shop as a member of the community and just sit down with one of our police officers and talk to them about what's going on in your community. What are your concerns? What don't you like about what they do? And they foster conversation. They listen, and there's feedback, and there's dialogue. And this is how we're going to get beyond this low point, I think, is by pushing back against those who want to divide. There are certain groups out there that want to divide. I believe it. And they do it by just trashing everything law enforcement does and make you believe that they're out to get you. They're not, okay? They're out to get crime. That's their job. And so we need to push back against these narratives and not be afraid to be vocal about it, and then go from there and then foster those community conversations, and then add funding to the mission of law enforcement, not take away the funding.
All right. No, I hear you, and I believe I support the conversation aspect. Yeah, we need to have those conversations as a country as a whole, and we need to restore our communities, and also, law enforcement. How do we reform policing, and build those relationships within the community? Because I would hate to see a situation where policing is we do it with policing and then crime goes up in our communities, and I don't want to see a situation where there are a lot of rogue cops out there who are not being held accountable. And I support body cams. I think they should be on. It protects the officer and it protects the citizen. It protects both.
You know what I've seen a lot of time with some of these body cam situations, and again, as I mentioned before, there's a lot of people who want to foment division no matter what. But quite a lot, the body cam ends up justifying the police officer's actions, and it gives you a real world point of view on what exactly happened,
Right.
And it gives you a synopsis of the dangerous jobs that law enforcement officers go through. And so obviously, every department needs to kind of make that own determination. There are budget considerations. There are a whole host of things that people need to consider before, saying, that policy should be there no matter what. But I will say, from what I've seen, not only as working as a prosecutor and just some of these incidents in the news, you kind of see some of these situations that law enforcement was in the right. And I'm sorry, I want to bring up a situation that happened in Atlanta. One of those that situation where I believe the individual was passed out in his car, like in a Wendy's parking lot. You see the whole interaction of the officer was so polite and not aggressive at all. And he was going to do his job and arrest somebody who was drunk and behind the wheel. And he just couldn't leave him there because he could have woke up and then drove off and then put, somebody's family in danger, right? As a drunk driver. So he's doing his job by placing him in custody. But the person who was being treated so nicely, all of a sudden, 0 to 60 real quick, gets aggressive with the police officer, starts wrestling him. They're on the ground. He takes his taser, starts running and points it at a police officer. And we're supposed to believe the officer's the bad guy in that situation? That's another example. These folks are out there, they're serving and protecting by and large. And as with any profession, there will be people who shouldn't be there, right? But we don't treat other professions like that, like we do like with law enforcement. We don't say when we had those bad teachers coming up, that shouldn't be teaching. We don't trash the profession of teaching. It's not something we do. We, contain it to that particular teacher.
Right.
But for some reason, we think it's okay to trash a whole profession when it's law enforcement.
Right.
We have to stop. We have to stop that analysis. It's wrong.
I hear you. I never thought about. Well, thank you for that too, because I'm a teacher. I like that.
Right.
Yeah, no, I never thought about that. I never thought it in that light. Well, the reason I brought up the body cam, obviously, every department, they're different. They have their own jurisdiction. That'll be up to that county or that city or even that state. I say the body cam because that not only protects the officer, but it also protects the citizen. Now, there's transparency, because one of the things when I speak to my cousin, he's told me, he's a cop in Miami. He goes, "Hey, look, being a police, when these interactions happen and people see it, they only see what the media is showing, which is just a quick video snapshot. They're not showing the entire interaction. And people will say, well, and the cop should have done this, the cop should have done that." But my cousin tells me, Anderson, if as citizens, if we were put in the same situation that he's put in on a daily basis, we would react the same way the cops reacted. And there were two. I saw these two videos. There were these two activists down in Texas, and you could watch them on YouTube. They were criticizing police. Policing is terrible. They're racist. Yada yada. And there are bad cops out there. Don't get it twisted. But so then the cops took him on a live simulation. So they put him in a scenario where he was the cop, and they had a robber come, and he had to pull the guy over. He had to pull the guy. He got out of the car. No, he pulled the guy over. He got out of the car. He walked towards the suspect's car. He told him to get out. The suspect gets out and starts walking towards him. Guess what he did both times?
What?
He pulled his gun out and started shooting. He started letting out. But he was so critical of police. Oh, so they should have done this. But as soon as the suspect was approaching him, he told the suspect, he let out. He let out at least 3 or 4 rounds. And it's like, but wait. And so that's why I always tell people we have to wait for the facts until everything comes out.
Right.
Then we can touch, because it's so easy when we're sitting on our couches. And that me included, we're sitting on our couches. Well, he should have done this. It's like watching sports. He should have took that shot. This was should have done that. He should have gone. He should have made that catch. But when you're in that situation, it's completely different. Right. And so it's amazing how these things always play out. But as we're wrapping up, Bernie, what is one thing? If you could go back and change one thing, what would it be? And what advice would you give to those who want to be where you're at one day?
I'm not one to always look back, and I don't look back a whole lot. And I do to add perspective, because you want to be grateful to where you've come from. But, I'm very blessed, where I'm at today and things I've done. There are different things depending on what people are pursuing that I give recommendations for. But, it would really depend on a particular situation. But I think, especially in recent, in my adult life, is, based on the facts that I have at the time, I want to act on them and certainly do my best. That's always been kind of a model for me, just doing your best at all times. And if you're not privy to something, to a piece of information, then that's different. And you can go back and do it differently had you known differently. But I think if you be prepared, for whatever you're doing, right? And try to get as much information on that particular thing as possible. And go from there. I will say this. Growing up, there are certain things I didn't know. Like, I didn't know, coming out of high school, there's young people listening, about taking a prep course for the SAT or ACT. And, I didn't do that. Mm-hmm. I didn't even take a prep course for the LSAT. I studied on it on my own. Mm-hmm. But there's value to those things if you know about them. Because I think it can be very beneficial to where you end up, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you're looking into those type of things, that's something I wish I at least knew I could do, and I didn't. But I'm happy with how things turned out. I went to some good schools. I met a lot of great people. So it's not to say I want to redo anything, but if you know that now and you want to do your best, I think looking at those kind of tests that helps you with those courses that help you with standardized testing for wanting to get into your choice of college, your choice of graduate school, is a wise investment. It's not to say you can't do it without it. Like I said, I turned out fine. I didn't do any of those. I did get wise and knew that after law school, and did a bar prep course. Thank goodness I did that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, just look into those type of things. But otherwise, my advice would be assess everything, gather as much information as possible, because even if, you took a different course, when you look back, you can at least say, hey, I acted based on the information I had at the time. What you don't want to do is look back and say, well, I knew I could have done this, but I didn't.
Right.
And then you can start having those sleepless nights, right? And tossing and turning, because then you could play the what if game all night long.
Right.
But don't allow yourself to do that later on. So act on the information that you have. And if you later learn something new, don't beat yourself over it, because you only know what you know, and just be grateful for your experiences.
I completely agree. And it's never too late to start over. That's the beauty about America. You know, as long as you're alive, it's America. You could always be who you were meant to be. But it was a pleasure, my brother, having you on. Again, if my friends and family in Florida, go out and support. What is it, Bernie? Jacques.
BernieForFlorida.com.
BernieForFlorida.com.
BernieForFlorida.com. And it's Bernie with a Y, not spelled I-E,
I-E?
the
Okay.
socialist way. So this is the capitalist way.
This is the
way. Yeah. Bernie with a Y.
Okay,
BernieForFlorida.com. Please join our movement. Please support us, and help us keep Florida free.
All right, appreciate you, man. Thank you.
All right, Anderson, thank you so much for the time, and all the best with this program and bringing out great conversations. Great catching up with you, man.
All right, you too.
All right, see ya.